John chapter 11 from verse 45. Many of the Jews who'd come to visit Mary and saw what Jesus did in raising Lazarus from the dead believed in him, but some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Then the leading priests and Pharisees called a meeting of the Jewish council. They asked, "What should we do? This man is doing many miracles. If we let him continue doing these things, everyone will believe in him." If we let him carry on doing miracles, everyone will believe in him. Interesting. Then the Romans will come and take away our temple and our nation. And in the older versions it says our place and our nation. One of the men there was Caiaphas, the high priest that year. He said, "You people know nothing. You don't realise that it's better for one man to die for the people than for the whole nation to be destroyed." Caiaphas did not think of this himself. As high priest that year, he was really prophesying that Jesus would die for the Jewish nation and for God's scattered children to bring them all together and make them one. That day, they started planning to kill Jesus. So here we have an encounter, so to speak, between Jesus and Caiaphas. Even though they don't meet, the principle that brought Jesus to that place and the principle that brought Caiaphas to that place are in direct contradistinction. They're set against each other. So in this encounter between Jesus and Caiaphas, the rulers of the Jews are planning to kill Jesus. They fear that the fame of a Lazarus who's been raised from the dead will promote the cause of Jesus. But there are other reasons as well. If you think about it, if they accept that Jesus is the Messiah, then really their reign is over. Right? It won't be the Romans taking away their place. It'll be the Jews, because Jesus really has been teaching that every man, every woman is their own priest, that they have access to God for themselves, that Jesus is raising spiritual relationship above legalistic religion. Do you remember he's saying, should you worship God in Samaria or in Jerusalem? It doesn't matter. God is spirit, and he's actively seeking those who will worship him in spirit and truth. So he is stepping over the heads of the rulers of ritual regularity and legalistic religion and formalism. And he's bringing God to the fallen sinner and making it a matter of the heart and not a matter of the head, the intellect. And these Jews here recognise that there was a showdown coming, one way or another. But when Jesus came to the trial, that wasn't the reason that they brought forward. The reason that they brought forward was treason against the emperor. Do you remember they said, if you let this man go, you are not Caesar's friend. And so here's the beginning, the germ of that idea. If we let him alone, the Romans will come and take away our place, our position, and our nation. But the real reason, according to the Gospel of John, was hatred of the light. They're offering patriotism, public zeal, citizenship, loyalty, prudence, far-sighted policy, all that kind of stuff. It's always so, isn't it? People never really get down to facing the truth in themselves. I used to work in a prison, and every time you get the guy to talk about how he ended up in that position, he'd give 100 reasons, except for the one that, well, I actually stole the money. Except for the one that puts himself on the line and exposes his own sin. And so there are those in the council who don't want to kill Jesus. Now we know that Nicodemus is discussing and discovering things for himself. And so maybe there's others as well who are unhappy with the idea of bringing an innocent man and putting him on trial, an innocent man. So maybe there's those who recognise his innocence, but Caiaphas kind of steps in, takes centre stage, and he says, you know nothing at all, nor you consider that it's expedient that one man die for the people so that the whole nation does not perish. And this, astonishingly, in the mouth of an enemy of Jesus, Caiaphas, is the whole hub of Christianity, the whole centre of the wheel from which everything else derives. Caiaphas had stated the necessity of the innocent suffering for the guilty. But those words mean one thing when they come from the lips of love, and they mean another thing when they come from the lips of expediency and policy. And yet John, he's writing the gospel years later, and he's reflecting, he's saying this was prophetic, this was inspired almost. He uses that, he doesn't hesitate to call it prophetic, because he says, being high priest that year, maybe he had a special understanding of what God was saying, even if he misunderstood the principle of it. He couldn't help but feel that there was something in the words that Caiaphas said that were deeper than even what Caiaphas meant. And it's a coincidence. No, it's not a coincidence. It's a truth that's being looked at from two opposite angles. And one is the angle of the world, and the other is the angle of God. One is a way of looking at it according to the flesh, you might say, and the other is according to the Spirit. One is the side of Caiaphas, doing what is expedient, and the other is the side of God, doing what is right. And that truth that's being looked at from two opposite sides is the truth of the vicarious sacrifice of Christ. Okay? There's a lot to say here, and it's a very profound thing. Let me just say one more thing today. You can see the cross from two angles. When you see it from the world's point of view, you see it as unjust, as something that is gross and cruel. It is, in fact, the very worst that man can do. But seen as John saw it, seen as God sees it, it's the deepest of all truths, and it is, in fact, the very best that God can do. I better explain it on another occasion. May God bless you today.